A drive through Smithwick 60 years ago. Today I'd like to take you on a drive through Smithwick as it was about 60 years ago. This isn't a history lesson, it's simply the way I remember it. When I was 14 years old and finally old enough to drive, I knew just about everyone who lived out this way. Back then, Farm to Market 1431 was a quiet country road running from Marble Falls to Cedar Park. Just a few years earlier, when I was born, the road from Smithwick to Lago Vista was still a gravel surface. This was long before subdivisions, lake houses, and newcomers. Nearly everyone belonged to one of the old families that had lived there for generations. So let's head east out of Marble Falls and take a drive through Smithwick as I remember it. I always felt you had reached Smithwick when you came to the old Hood place, which was just past the road down to the Jackson Bottom. Robert Hood lived there on the right, alone after his parents had passed away in 1956. The next road led down to the Colorado River bottoms, from where you could look across and see Double Horn Creek on the other side where it came in and joined the river. It was also the only road into what everyone called the Schaffer, now known as Schaffer Bend Park. Several longtime families lived along that road, including the Hevingtons. Not far off the highway was a little wood frame house where Grandpa Lynn lived. If you went down to the river, you came to Boyd and Beulah's. A little past them is where Jack and Mickey Ginner lived. They had sons Wayne, Michael, and Roscoe. There were a younger sister or two, but I don't recall their names. Just along that road is where our place started. A little further east was the gate into our place. There was no subdivision back then, just 223 acres stretching from the highway down to the lake. We had cattle and horses and goats and plenty of wildlife, and my little donkey Tar Baby. Just beyond that, going off the hill, was a driveway to the right where Bonnie and Cecil Lewis were raising two boys, my brother Kenny and me. Next, you'd cross a little creek called Shop Branch, and that's right past that's where my grandmother, Leona Lewis, better known as Aunt Noni or just Noni to most, lived there on the right. Across the highway from her was where Jim and Hannah Cox and Hannah's son Jimmy Palmer lived. Jim Cox had married Hannah in the early 1960s after she lost her husband to a boating accident up near Fort Worth. Every home along this road has a story. Up the next hill and off to the right was the home of Kenny and Ollie Ann Baker and their kids, Linville, Sissy, Loris Lynn, and Leslie. Sandra Lilly had come to live with them by that time. Next came the Lodge Road, now known as County Road 344, that led down to the old Smithwick Mill and the Masonic Lodge. Going down that road were the Rippies, Loris and Martha's on the right. A little further down on the left was Landis and May Ware's place. Keep driving, and then out across the pasture was an old house that belonged to Aunt Ollie Cox. Drop off a steep hill, and there was the Masonic Lodge building. Some of my best memories were made down at the lodge. On the first Saturday night of every month, families gathered for lodge supper. One of the members hosted each time, supplying the meat and the main food items, with everyone bringing their own offerings. After the meal, the men would head upstairs for their meetings, and the women visited while cleaning up the kitchen and dining hall, and us kids spent the evening exploring the grounds. Around the lodge building was a really snaking-looking country, but somehow I don't remember anyone ever getting snake bitten or even killing a snake there as we tromped around at night. As we got older, we'd sit in parked cars listening to AM radio until it was time for lodge to be over, and we'd head for home. We were always in hopes of making it in time to see Gunsmoke on TV. Just across the parking lot from the lodge was Orrin and Effie Lewis's house. Okay, now back out to 1431, and off the left side of the road was Harlan Hall's place. He had married Hazel, and they lived in a mobile home there. Beside that was Clint Hall's store. It was a simple portable building that he had made into a store that was there mostly to sell beer, but he had a few other items as well. Continuing on east was the Smithwick Community Center, built where the old school had once stood. Every summer, the community gathered there for a homecoming celebration. Friday afternoon, the men in the community brought goats, Spanish and Angora. They would be slaughtered and dressed out and ready to go to the pits and cook all night on large metal pits out beneath the old oak trees by the road. Many of the men would stay there cooking all night and doing what men did, left out like that. The next morning, women covered the long tables with vegetables, salads, pies, cakes, and every kind of homemade dish imaginable. If you ever wanted to see what a true rural community looked like, that was it. Next door stood the Church of Christ, where most of us went to church. Across the highway and out of ways was Merle and Melvin Hiney's place. Up behind them a ways was Aunt Maud Gibson. That was Merle's mother. Just past the church tabernacle was a road that went out to Andy and Maggie Hall's place. By that time, Clint and Selden, or Skinny as he was called, still lived there also. Further east was the Smithwick store that Everett and Maud Jackson had operated, but by this time it sat empty. They had both passed on. Only a couple of years prior to this time, old man Cardwell, Hiram, lived down along the creek in what was just a little hut on Everett Jackson's land. As young boys, we'd ride our horses over and visit with him and sit beneath the oak trees listening to his stories. Back then, he seemed really ancient. Thinking back now, he probably wasn't much older than I am today. But with the passing of Maud and Everett Jackson, he moved back into Marble Falls. Living there in Maud and Everett's old house, mostly by himself, was Milton. Milton was deaf from birth. Milton never drove, but he always found a ride to Marble Falls and back just about every day, and you'd see him around town. Just past the old store was the Smithwick Cemetery, where many of my family members are laid to rest. Back in those days, twice each year, everyone would gather for cemetery working days. People mowed, trimmed, pulled weeds, shared a meal, and visited with neighbors they hadn't seen in months. It wasn't just about taking care of the cemetery, it was about taking care of each other. As we continue on east, we passed one family after another. Down the road across from the cemetery was where the Crass family lived. Martin was the Church of Christ preacher. Brother Crass and Lorena had a son, Ray, and a daughter, Jane Ann. Next place was the Henrys, off to the right. Rod and Mary with their sons, Pat and Billie Jean. Then there was Jack and Shirley Rogers at the next place. The next place was Sox and Lois Jackson and their son Kenny, or Big Kenny as we called him to distinguish him from Little Kenny, my brother. The next place was the Merediths, Lofton and Velma, just past Hickory Creek on the right. Down below their house was Billy Lamb Falls, our favorite swimming hole. There on Hickory Creek, downstream side of 1431. We would either enter it by parking at the Merediths, and sometimes we'd go in through Sox Jackson's place. Across the highway from the Merediths were the Aldersons, Joe and Nyla, and their two daughters, Rhonda and Sharon Jane. The next place on the right was Will and Julia Jackson, and across the highway were the Despains, Ratliff and Etna. They still had a daughter, Margie Fay, at home at this time. The Schaefers lived a little further down the road at the old Belvin place. That was Red and Alta Schaefer with sons Mike, Billy Carson, and Norman Ray. And finally, my mother's old boating house home place. But that place was sitting vacant and mostly falling down by this time. For a few years, Claude and Vivian Daughtery lived in a mobile home out along the highway and looked after the boating house place for some new owners. Every one of those places held memories. Every family helped shape Smithwick, the Smithwick I was fortunate enough to grow up in. When we get to this part is about where I think of us leaving Smithwick. Down beyond that was the Brown Ranch, Spanish Oak Creek, and the road to Turkey Bend. But those are all stories for another day. Time changes every community, but in my mind, I can still make this drive. And I hope for a few minutes today you enjoyed riding along with me. What I find most remarkable about doing this ride, every single person was from Smithwick, with years and years of history there. And the Angora Chronicles has a member that somehow connects to just about everything we mentioned along this drive.